Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be going through the second part of Chapter 4 of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So let's dive straight in. So in this first half, we've seen that a very sweet old man, Sedanvus Carew, just wandering around at night, seems to have maybe got a little bit lost, speaks to Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Hyde just beats him and kills him. I'm laughing because I'm like, what the heck? Why? And just destroys him and ends his life. And it's actually very gothic the way that it's described, all of the terrible brutality of it. It's really nasty, to the point that the maid faints because she's watching from her window. She faints because of the brutality of it all. The police are called, obviously, and Mr. Utterson is also called as a lawyer to sort of be part of the investigation and to try and work out maybe the legal ramifications of all of this, and also to be a witness, not a suspect. So they bring him in the next morning, and there is an urgency because it's before he's out of bed. Notice the emphasis also created by, the semicolon there. So he's kind of rushed to the scene effectively, which shows that it is quite a serious case. At this point, we don't know that the man that was killed was a sir. He was actually an elected government official. So this would be the equivalent of like an MP in London being brutally murdered in the streets of London, and the investigation that followed. So he goes to the police station, and he then the body is recognized as Sedanvus Carew, as I've been mentioning, and it gets to the point where Mr. Utterson, I said that he was a witness. It's because there was the cane, right? Mr. Hyde was holding a cane and sort of beating the cane into his hand, maybe slightly intimidatingly at the start, before he uses it to end Sedanvus' life. So Mr. Utterson actually ends up recognizing the cane. It's a broken and battered version of a cane that Mr. Utterson had presented many years before to Henry Jekyll. So they have the murder weapon, and the murder weapon was actually from Mr. Utterson to Dr. Jekyll. So this raises some suspicions also of like, well, hang on a minute, why is Mr. Hyde walking around the streets of London with Dr. Jekyll's property? We know that Mr. Hyde has access to the back entrance of Dr. Jekyll's home, and we know that he seems to come and go as he pleases. So it doesn't immediately make Dr. Jekyll guilty, but it is quite strange. Robert Louis Stevenson then brings us back to some pathetic fallacy, the first fog of the season, a great chocolate-coloured pall lowered over heaven. So this, again, is meant to reflect the great tragedy of this murder and how senseless and criminal it was. But Robert Louis Stevenson does something even more interesting afterwards. He talks about the darkness of the fog in the morning light, and then he says that a haggard shaft of daylight would occasionally glance between the swirling wreaths. I added the word occasionally, but glance suggests, sudden and quick and more than once. Now, the haggard shaft of daylight, light obviously is meant to represent good, but haggard means tired. So it's almost like good is tired and exhausted from having to fend off bad, which is obviously the fog, the darkness of that is surrounding London. So it's good versus evil in this pathetic fallacy. And in this case, the haggard shaft of daylight, I think, is meant to represent Dr. Jekyll himself. Dr. Jekyll, as he can, we find out later, obviously, he's more and more often becoming Mr. Hyde, and it's sucking more and more of the life and energy out of him. He's becoming more and more drained, more and more tired, more and more evil, until eventually we get to the point where Dr. Jekyll actually can't even continue to be himself. The default becomes Mr. Hyde. So that haggard shaft of daylight that's glancing through the swirling wreaths, it's good versus evil, and good is losing. And we find out that the stakes of this are also very high, because Sorry, let me just say one other thing as well. We're also reminded of just the general decay of London through many ragged children huddled in the doorways, many women of different nationalities passing out key in hand to have a morning glass. So we're also, as well as the pathetic fallacy showing that evil is winning, we've also got this quite bad sense of London in a bit of decay. There's lots of poverty, there's lots of alcoholism. This is really good context for you to see. Yeah. So in the Victorian era, which was filled with repression and trying to make everyone appear like the Victorian gentleman and trying to aim for that, the reality was more and more people were becoming impoverished in the city of London and other cities in the UK, and more alcoholism, more and more crime. It was actually becoming more and more like Gotham City, to be honest with you, from Batman. So we've got this reminder of the kind of general moral decay of London. And the stakes are very high. I'll finish with this thought, that Dr. Jekyll has favoured this man, Mr. Hyde, who's committed murder. And Mr. Hyde, despite being a murderer, is still currently written into a will that would entitle him to £250,000 sterling. Now, I don't know exactly how much that is worth in today's money, but I'm going to estimate that it's worth at least £10 million in today's money. This is a huge amount of money. It might be worth more than that, honestly. But you see, as this narrative is developing, that we've got more and more of a sense of good versus evil, a growing sense of evil winning over good. There's now been a murder committed. And let's just see what happens in the next chapter. So that's the end of chapter 4.